Ahoy, Buccaneers and Buccarinas! My name be Captain Yugioh, and welcome back to the channel with the video, the official expansion review for Ashes of Outland, which is going to be very, very long, because I'm reviewing every single card in the set. Before anything else, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, ring the bell for notifications. We do Overwatch videos on Tuesdays, Hearthstone videos on Thursdays, and Yugioh videos every single Friday. So without further ado, let's not waste any time, let's get right into it. As a quick reminder, the review system is basically going to be on a star rating from 1 to 5 stars, and depending on how the star ranking works out, I'll either be recommending to plunder the actual card, swap the deck with it, in other words, kind of mix it up, maybe you say you like it, or I'll just say Keelhauled because I don't think it's going to be very good whatsoever. So, let's start with the Demon Hunter class, which is basically the new class in the set, and is also the big part of this set in terms of what class cards are. And we're going to start off with Crimson Sigil Runner, a 1-mana 2/1 with the outcast effect of draw a card. But for the most part, there are a lot of 1 health minions kind of running around the set, and I think a lot of them are like, there's a lot of 1-mana 2/1s in particular in the set, and I think that's kind of the, something that's like, you really want to get the most value out of these minions, because chances are something is going to kill them sooner or later, because they are not going to be around for very long. Having the ability to draw another card, depending on if this is the leftmost or rightmost card in your hand, is pretty, it's a pretty good little substitute for the time being. So I'm going to give this guy a bit of a 3-star rating. I think he'll be played in a few different Demon Hunter decks, but ultimately, it's kind of up for debate on whether or not he'll be good. So swap the deck with this one. Furious Dolphin is a 2-mana 3/2 Murloc with the battle cry that if your hero attack this turn gains +1 attack and rush. You could look at this as a 3-mana card because you will have to pay at least 1 mana to get your hero to attack, although if you have something like Twin Slice or Second Slice in your hand, you basically can attack for free. In any case, Furious Dolphin is going to be coming in as a 4/2 with rush, and that's really, really strong for 2 mana. I think it's going to be very useful. I think it's going to be a nice uptrade, so I'm going to give this thing 5 stars. This is a plunder if I ever saw one. Next up on the list we have Spectral Sight, a 2-mana spell with the draw a card effect with an outcast effect of draw another card. I think this is going to be very useful for Demon Hunters that are running through their deck and running out of cards very quickly, and it's a nice, really handy top deck that just gives you a couple of extra cards. If you don't have a very aggressively minded Demon Hunter deck, this may not be the card for you, so that's why I'm giving this 4 stars. I say it's a plunder, but it may not be a must-run in every Demon Hunter deck. Netherwalker is next up on the list, a 2-mana 2/2 with the simple battle cry of Discover a Demon. I don't think there's a lot of great demons that kind of go into this particular class right at the moment. There are some very interesting demons that work out, but unless you're really pushing into that demon strategy, I don't think this card is really going to be worth it. I'm giving it 2 stars. I'm going to say this is more of a swap the deck, maybe even a Keelhaul on this one. Next up is Immolation Aura, a 2-mana spell that deals 1 damage to every single minion in play twice. And that little twice is actually really good because you can get rid of death rattles pretty easily. Reborn minions with 1 health remaining and still have their reborn effect will basically get wiped out. I'm going to give this card 4 stars because I think this is going to be seeing play in a lot of different decks, especially to go up against various aggro decks. Definitely a plunder for my opinion. Kane Sunfury is a legendary minion, 4-mana 3/5 with charge. Probably one of the few cards that have been permitted with charge in the last... Jeez, it's been years. But more importantly, this guy lets all friendly attacks ignore taunt. Huge ability right there. I think that's going to be really, really strong, especially for aggressive-minded Demon Hunters, just so they can get around all these big wall taunty things and just go right to the face, probably. That's basically where you want. And even if you're not attacking the face, you still have the ability to attack the other minions that don't have taunt because you are ignoring taunt. So, in my opinion, Kane Sunfury is absolutely a must-have. I'm going to give this thing 5 stars, 6 stars, 11 stars, because I think this card is absolutely the best card in this set. This is a plunder. This is definitely worth it. Ashtongue Battlelord is next. It's a 4-mana 3/5 with Taunt and Lifesteal. I think that's pretty simple and very effective because this is not only a very good defensively minded creature, but the Lifesteal helps you recover that damage as well, and it sets up a pretty good, something or other to get your opponent trying to get after that. So in my thoughts, this is a 4-star card. Absolutely, definitely going to be a plunder in my case. Skull of Gul'dan is a 5-mana card that has absolutely been... I've mentioned this card before in passing, but it's a 5-mana spell that draws you 3 cards, but has the outcast effect of letting them cost 3 less. This is probably, arguably, the best spell card in the set. Like, this just, it's up there. I would say this card and our next card even are probably the 2 big ones of the set, but this card is very, very powerful. 5 stars. easily a Plunder. You're going to run this in every Demon Hunter deck. There's no question as to what decks won't run this. This thing probably is just a massive haul. Metamorphosis is a legendary spell, 5 mana, and it allows you to swap your hero power into deal 5 damage. This will become a 1 mana hero power, and after 2 uses, it swaps back. This can be useful as getting, you can use this to either get rid of a really big minion, or you can use this to finish off your opponent. The Metamorphosis card is very flexible. Honestly, I don't think there's anything to worry about with this one. 5 stars. Plunder it, for sure. The Warglaives of Azzinoth are next. It's a 5 mana weapon, 3 attack, 4 durability, and of course after you attack a minion, you get to attack again. Note that even if you lose the Warglaives of Azzinoth, you will be able to attack additionally again after that, as long as your last attack was on a minion. This is a pretty decent card, all things considered. Even seeing it in the prologue, you can see how useful the Warglaives of Azzinoth can be. However, you are continuously having to attack minions, and you only have 3 attack to start, which means you have to boost it in order to really maximize the value out of the Warglaives of Azzinoth. I'm kind of gonna give it 3 stars. I'm swapping the deck on it because I think it'll be fairly useful, but I don't know how strong the card itself is going to be. Imprisoned in Taeon is the next one up on the list. It follows up within the Imprisoned lineup, which is a bunch of demons in various classes that are dormant for 2 turns until they come out. Then they awaken and they come in with an effect. In Imprisoned in Taeon's case, he's a 5 mana 10/6 demon, which when he awakens after being dormant for 2 turns, he is going to deal 10 damage split across all enemies. In my opinion, the best way to look about the Imprisoned cards in particular is to assume that they are statted as though they are a 7 mana minion that is going to appear on turn 7, but you are paying for it in advance on turn 5. So in the case of Imprisoned in Taeon, you have a 10/6 that's going to come out on a couple turns and then deal 10 damage to a lot of different things. This can be very useful as an aggressive finisher in the case that your opponent has not a lot going on, or it could be used to hit some very big minions, or it could end up hitting a wide board and weakening a lot of the stuff. So I think Imprisoned in Taeon is very flexible, very useful. He is something you will probably consider running, so in my opinion that makes him a 5-star card, Plunder, that Imprisoned in Taeon. Next we got the Fel Summoner, a 6 mana 8/3 with the death rattle of summoning a random minion from your hand. It's okay. I don't really know how effective this kind of effect goes, and I don't really know how that interacts with the dormant cards in particular. The problem is you're paying 6 mana for an 8/3 that can only do so much and will probably be very easily removed, and unless you have a very useful big demon to kind of go along with it, I don't think this really is going to work out. 2 stars for me. I'm going to say Keelhaul on this one. The Priestess of Fury is a 7 mana 6/7 demon that has this interesting effect that at the end of your turn you deal 6 damage across all enemies. Combine this with Imprisoned in Taeon and you are getting a massive amount of damage going on the board, and it's hard to really say that this isn't going to be good. Like, I don't see how this could possibly be not good. The only problem I can really see with it is that the mana cost is a little bit high, so I don't know how much aggressive decks may want it, but mid-range Demon Hunter may really, be a big fan of this. In general, though, I think this is going to be a very good card. 4 stars, I'd say this is a Plunder for sure. The Coilfang Warlord is an 8 mana 9/5 that actually has Rush itself and this Death Rattle where it basically summons another Warlord, but it's a 5/9 with Taunt. There's a lot of stuff and a lot of value to kind of get out of that sort of thing, and I think that's probably going to be pretty useful. I would say this is a very strong card in that regard, so in my case, I'm going to give it 4 stars and say this is a Plunder for sure. It's hard not to see how this couldn't be a Plunder, really. I mean, I guess you could say it's expensive, but it's 8 mana. What do you want at 8 mana? A 12/12 that can't attack heroes? Oh no. And last but certainly not least, Pit Commander is the 9 mana 7/9 demon with Taunt, and at the end of your turn summons a random demon outside of your deck. Okay, that's okay, honestly. It's not particularly great. You really want to have a very demon-heavy centric build, and after a couple of the demons in the Demon Hunter class itself, it's not that great. So honestly, I'd say this is going to be just, 1 star. Keelhauled. Who needs it? Next, we're going to go into the Druid class, and this is going to be a very interesting class because they get some interesting little tools and the like to kind of go along with it. So, let's start off with Fungal Fortunes, a 2 mana spell that draws you 3 cards and discards any of the minions that you draw. This is very similar to the Book of Specters card from Witchwood for Mage, which was very similar. It drew 3 cards, and then it allowed you to keep them as long as none of them were spells. Now, it's not to say that a potential spell druid wouldn't be able to work around this, and certainly it's not to say that there isn't a very spell-heavy druid already in the form of something like Token Druid, but there are still some very good cards that kind of work with it, and Fungal Fortunes could definitely find a spot in that deck. For now, I'm not really sure how a Spell Druid is going to work out, so I'm going to give this card 3 stars and say you might want to swap the deck with this one. Next up, I kind of want to talk about the next couple of cards in a more general sense. We've got the Ironbark spell, and then we've got the Bogbeam spell. These two are very similar in that they both have, you know, effects where they can cost 0 if you have 7 or more mana crystals. With Ironbark, you're giving a minion +1/+3 and taunt, whereas with Bogbeam, you're dealing 3 damage to a minion. Ironbark can already be very useful since it starts out at 2 mana anyway, and it gives a minion taunt, which can very helpfully give you some defensive cover, especially if you put it on the right minion. So in my opinion, I think it'll probably end up run, so I think it's gonna get 3 stars from me. I cannot say the same thing for Bogbeam, unfortunately. Being a 3 mana card already that deals 3 damage to a minion is already kind of okay, but it's also something that is immediately ousted by something like Smite, Holy Smite and Priest. And even if you get to 7 mana or more and have it become free, you really need to hit a minion for a lot more than 3 damage if you're going to hit something at beyond 7 mana. Most of the time there are some really big minions coming down after that point, and Bogbeam is just not going to be that useful. So in my opinion, I think that's going to make that a 1-star card. Keelhaul the Bogbeam. Next up, we've got the Imprisoned Satyr. Again, another one of the Imprisoned cards. This one is a 3 mana 3/3 demon, which comes in dormant for 2 turns, but when it awakens, reduces the cost of a minion in your hand by 5. In a more minion-heavy version of Druid, this is probably going to be pretty decent, honestly. There is the caveat, of course, that it may not actually hit the minion you want. If you have too many minions in your hand and you have some cheap minions, you'll be able to get those out for free, but you would rather want that on a bigger minion if you can help it, and you may not hit the big minion that you want unless you can tailor your hand around to it. So I'm not sure how well it'll play out, so in my opinion this is going to get 3 stars. I'm saying swab the deck with this one. Next we get to hit up another series that's coming out into the Ashes of Outland expansion in the form of something like Archspore Mishpin. He is part of the Prime series, where basically they have, you know, generally lower stats. So Archspore Mishpin, for instance, is a 3 mana 3/4 with taunt, but they usually have a death rattle that shuffles a Prime version of the card into your deck, which has upgraded stats and an even more powerful effect. In the case of Archspore Mishpin, he gets to shuffle in Mishpin Prime, a 10 mana 9/9 with taunt, and the choose 1 effect of summoning a fungal giant with either taunt or rush. This is pretty useful because you're already having to run into Archspore Mishpin because he's got taunt, but on top of that, if you draw the Mishpin Prime, you get some major stat value in terms of being a 10 mana 18/18 worth of stats. The flexibility of this card and the ability for it to go off fairly easily, I think is what makes Archspore Mishpin worth running. So in my opinion, I'd say this is a 5-star card. Plunder it for sure, and expect it to be very, very powerful. Next we've got Germination, a 4 mana spell that summons a copy of a minion that you choose and gives that copy taunt. I'm not really sure what to make of this card, to be perfectly honest. I don't know how useful it's going to be, or what kind of effects you could possibly copy off of this, or what minions you could copy off of this. I mean, you could give one of your tokens taunt, or you could give maybe your fungal giant taunt if it survived. I'm a little iffy on it, so I'm going to give it 3 stars and say swap the deck, but I would not be surprised if it just doesn't do anything. Next we've got Overgrowth, a 4 mana spell for Druid that gives them 2 mana crystals. Except they're empty. Not exactly a terrible thing, but you are ramping up much, much more quickly than a lot of other classes by comparison, and I think that that in and of itself is going to be very, very useful. Having a turn for, you know, gain 2 empty mana crystals might not be so bad. So, in my opinion, this is going to be a 3-star card because we're going to swap the deck and see how this one plays out. Next, we've got the Glowfly Swarm, a 5 mana spell that summons a 2/2 Glowfly for every spell that's in your hand. This works along with the spell Druid that Fungal Fortunes wants to promote, and, well, it gives some credence to it. I mean, you could potentially summon out an entire field of 2/2s. How useful that ultimately is up for debate, especially depending on the massive board wipes that could potentially be going on. And I don't really know how Spell Druid is going to ultimately work. In my opinion, that kind of makes this card a little bit iffy, and I'm going to give it 3 stars and say swap the deck with this one. We'll see how this all plays out. Next, we've got the Marsh Hydra, a 7 mana 7/7 beast that has Rush, and after it attacks, you get to add an A-cost minion to your hand. It's completely random what that A-cost minion is, but that's actually a pretty good setup into your next turn, especially if you play this on turn 7. And if you are able to keep the Marsh Hydra, you can potentially get even more value, and 8 mana minions can be pretty strong, to be honest. I don't know if it'll work out, and I'm not really sure about it, but 7 mana 7/7 rushing into stuff getting it and then drawing you a card that's potentially pretty powerful might not be so bad. So I'm going to give it 3 stars and say swap the deck with it. I'd say that's pretty good. It's leaning more towards the plunder side in my opinion, so there's that. And last but not least for Druid, we have the legendary Yugioh Windsinger, a 9-mana 5/5 that makes your spells cost 1. This harkens back to the legendary card Aviana, which made all of your minions cost 1, and was so powerful that they actually had to nerf it into the wild mode to basically not promote so many powerful combos. But does the Yugioh Windsinger have any combos kind of to that effect? And right now the answer seems to be not really. I mean, I can't think of any Druid spells that immediately break this card, certainly, but it's not to say that that isn't a very powerful effect in and of itself. I don't really know exactly where this is going to go, so for me, this seems like a very powerful effect, but I'm not sure how it's going to end up. 3 stars for me. It's going to be a bit of a swap the deck on this one. Moving right along into Hunter, we have the Hellbore, a 1-mana 2/1 beast, with the death rattle that it gives a beast in your hand +1/+1. There's a ton of beast synergy in Hunter in this particular set, and Hellbore is just kind of the start of that. I think that's a pretty decent little buff, even if it is on a 1-mana 2/1, but it depends on how much value and what minion that ultimately ends up on. I don't really know how long-term this card could potentially see play, but I will be optimistic and say it's a 3-star card. Swap the deck with it. Give it a whirl. Next, we've got the Scavenger's Ingenuity, a 2-mana hunter spell that draws you a beast and gives it +3/+3. Combine this with Fresh Scent from the Galakrond's Awakening adventure, and you get a really powerful set of buffs. Heck, just drawing a beast and giving it +3/+3 could be really impactful. And beasts are looking like a pretty strong option at this particular point in time. So I would say Scavenger's Ingenuity, at the very least, is something to give a whirl. 5 stars for the Scavenger's Ingenuity. Definitely plunder it. Give it a try. Throw in for Beast Hunter. Next up we have the Imprisoned Fellmaw, a 2-mana 4/5 demon? Alright, imprisoned. Well, it's dormant for a couple of turns, but once it awakens, it completely destroys a random enemy minion. Imprisoned Fellmaw seems more like it's a 4-mana 4/5, which basically makes it a Yeti with Battle Cry, destroy a random enemy minion. But it's not quite a Yeti because it is delayed. Fellmaw has the issue that it waits a couple of turns, meaning your opponent could potentially play lots of minions, throw off the one that you would basically trying to destroy with the Imprisoned Fellmaw's effect, and it might end up being a little I'm gonna say this one's a 3-star card. Swap the deck for it. Let's see how this one works out. Pack Tactics is a next card on the list. It's a 2-mana secret that actually has the interesting effect that when one of your friendly minions is attacked, you get to summon a 3/3 copy of that minion. It's pretty interesting, actually. Like, I could see this being a potentially powerful effect for sure. It doesn't fully replace the rat trap that we're going to lose from Witchwood, but it does make up for it in terms of its own kind of effect, its own different stats. I think there's a lot of potential in this card. For me, that means this is definitely worth running in any sort of hunter build, and definitely worth the run. 4 stars, plunder that way. Next, we come across the legendary Zixor, Apex Predator, a 3-mana 2/4 beast with Rush and the Prime Death Rattle, where you will be able to shuffle in Zixor Prime into your deck, an 8-mana 4/4 that when it comes into play has Rush and summons 3 copies of itself. Given the fact that we have so much beast synergy going into Hunter in this set, I am very much willing to say that this is going to be a prime candidate for Beast Hunter shenanigans. I wasn't sure about it at first, but I do think, given the potential combos and the fact that there's so much beast-related synergy in the Hunter deck in this expansion, 5 stars. Plunder it for sure. Next up, we've got the Augmented Porcupine, a 3-mana 2/4 beast with the interesting death rattle that it'll deal its attack as damage to all enemies. You combine this with something like Fresh Scent, or you combine it with the Scavenger's Ingenuity, or heck, even if you accidentally duplicate it off of Pack Tactics, and by accidentally, I mean your opponent does that for you, could be potentially very powerful. Could also be not so powerful. I'm not really sure how that ends up, but we'll see how this goes. 3 stars, swap the deck. Machnathal Lion is next up on the list, a 4-mana 5/2 beast with the rush attack and a battle cry that copies a death rattle from one of your friendly minions. I'm not really sure how this death rattle thing goes into it, but when you count stuff like Hellbore and Augmented Porcupine in the set to copy off of, there's a lot of potential for Machnathal Lion to not only be a very powerful rush minion, but even be a powerful death rattle minion on top of that. I think there's more value to be had out of Machnathal Lion if you can copy a death rattle, so in my opinion this is going to be a 3-star card. Definitely consider it, swab the deck, we'll see how this one plays out. As if you needed more beast synergy to go into the deck, here's Scrapshot, a 4-mana spell that deals 3 damage to a minion and buffs a beast minion in your hand with +3/+3. You can mine that off of other buffs like Scavenger's Ingenuity, and you could be looking at some very powerful beasts. I'm looking at you, Zixor Prime. I'd say this is going to be a 4-star card. At the very least, plunder it, try it out in your Beast Hunter deck, and really go in for the kill. Speaking of going in for the kill, how about that Beastmaster Leorox, an 8-mana 5/5 with the interesting battle cry of summoning 3 beasts from your hand. There are not a whole lot of cards that you may want to summon out directly from your hand, but the fact that this effect does act like a boom ship sort of thing for Beast Hunter is very, very powerful. In particular, I'm thinking of King Crush being a very potent force in combination with Leorox. It could be really strong, it could be really null, it could be okay, it could be great. Definitely gonna see a little bit of experimentation, so I'd say this is a 3-star card. Swap the deck on it and let's see how this one plays out. And finally for Hunters, we have Nagrand Slam, a 10-mana spell that summons 4 3/5 Cleft Hoofs that attack random enemies. That's not too shabby, honestly, and the fact that it's attacking immediately could mean your opponent is in for a really rough time. You could even surprise your opponent with this and end up destroying a really powerful minion. You could wipe out a lot of their field. You could hit them in the face for 12 damage. We'll see how this one ends up panning out, but I'm going to go ahead and give it 4 stars because I think it's going to be pretty good to plunder this one and play it. Next up on the list is Mage, and we start off with the legendary spell Evocation, a 1-mana spell that fills your hand up with random mage spells, but at the end of the turn, you discard them all. There's a lot of variance that kind of comes with this particular spell, but, you know, I think generally speaking, it's gonna end up better in your favor, and besides, you don't have to cast the spells you get, you just have to cast the good ones that you get. So, hopefully you get some good ones, and in the meantime, I think it's gonna be pretty good. I'm gonna give it 4 stars, and say this is a plunder for sure. Feel free to give it a run, and see how it works. One such mage spell you may end up getting is the Font of Power, a 1-mana spell that discovers a mage minion, but has the interesting effect that if your deck has no minions in it, you get to keep all 3 of your options. This is kind of an interesting little no-minion mage kind of thing, kind of like the no-minion druid sort of thing going on with the all-spell druid, but it's in spell mage, which is already pretty strong in terms of, well, being a spell-based deck. Whether or not this effect is really good is up for debate. It kind of depends on the minion you end up getting or the minions you end up getting. So I'm a little iffy on this card. I'm going to give it 3 stars and say that you want to swap the deck with this one. Could be good, could be bad. Who knows? Next is Astromancer Solarian, a 2-mana 3/2 legendary minion with spell damage +1 and has the Prime effect, where it'll become Solarian Prime, a 7-mana 7/7. It also has spell damage +1, and on top of that has the battle cry to cast 5 random mage spells, but here's the kicker, they will target your enemies if they need to. And that's really good, honestly. Usually when you have these types of effects where you're just casting a bunch of random mage spells, think Spugs of Yogg-Saron for instance, then, you know, it just kind of affects everything on the board and affects every sort of thing. But with Solarian Prime, you're talking about just dealing lots of specific damage towards your opponent. You're dealing with only mage spells, which includes things like Arcane Explosion, Fireball, Pyroblast. There's a lot of variance in this sort of thing, and any damage that you're doing is getting increased by an extra 1 with Solarian Prime. I'm actually going to give this one 4 stars because I do think it's going to be a very powerful mage minion, but we won't know how well it's going to do in the long run, but at the very least, it's going to be very, very strong. Next we have the Apexis Smuggler, a 2-mana 2/3 minion that after you cast a secret, you discover a spell. I think that's a pretty interesting effect, and as somebody who loves secrets, I don't know if you ever saw that video about it, I certainly am appreciative of this type of effect. I don't really know how powerful this is really going to be in the long run. I mean, you are dependent on casting a secret first, and then you're having to discover the spell, so you're having to spend a lot of mana to get a potentially good option. I'm gonna give this one 3 stars because I'm not entirely sure, I'm not really sold really on how powerful it is, but I'm not gonna knock it until I try it at least. So swap the deck with this and let's see how this one works out. Incanter's Flow is another mage spell that you could potentially get, and it costs 2 mana, but it reduces the cost of spells in your deck by 1. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being ran into a whole lot and you just kind of get these super powerful spells for just a little bit cheaper. And if you get it off of evocation, well, that's even better because then you can continue to discount more of your spells, which makes your deck even stronger in the long run. So there's a lot of power in this card. I'm going to give it 4 stars and say that this is a plunder for sure. Star Scryer is the next one on our list, a 2 mana 3/1 with the death rattle of drawing a spell. The only problem is I don't think a 2 mana 3/1 is going to really last long enough to really do a lot, and being at 1 health is very picky. So there's maybe some combo potential with some other cards, but it's also at a very shaky distance. I'm going to give this one 3 stars and say you got to swap the deck with this one. It has potential to be very powerful in a specific deck. I just don't really know if this is, going to see lots of play. Next we come to the Imprisoned Observer, a 3 mana 4/5 demon that goes dormant for 2 turns, and after it awakens deals 2 damage all across the board against all of your enemy minions. That's actually not a bad effect, all things considered, but my biggest concern is that this effect is fairly easy to plan around if your opponent isn't playing something like, say, Token Druid, which is going to have a lot of tiny health minions. So Imprisoned Observer is powerful, but I don't think it's really kind of cutting it for me, honestly, and I just don't think it's that great of a card. I'm gonna give it 2 stars and say it's probably better to just leave this one offshore. Keelhaul it if you can. Next we come to the Netherwind Portal, a 3 mana secret that after your opponent casts a spell, summons you a random 4-cost minion. There are some 4-cost minions that are pretty good, and there's some 4-cost minions that are pretty not so great to get off of this. I'm gonna give it 3 stars because I'm just not sure whether it's gonna place out in the long run. I think you ought to swap the deck, maybe give it a whirl and see how it plays out. Apexis Blast is another card for the all-spell mage deck, which is a 5 mana spell that deals 5 damage. And if you have no minions in your deck, you actually get to summon a 5-cost minion. Kind of like the Netherwind Portal, I'm not really sure about the value of a 5-cost minion, but I guess if it's a 5-cost minion plus Battlecry deal 5 damage, then the stat value may not matter. We'll see how that kind of pans out. I'm going to give this one 3 stars and say swap the deck. We'll see how this Spell Mage really plans out with this Apexis Blast going around. And finally, for all of you Freeze Mages out there, we've got the perfect card for you, Deep Freeze. An 8 mana spell that not only freezes an enemy, but summons you out 2 3/6 water elementals. The only issue I think of with Deep Freeze is that it's a very expensive spell to just maybe stall out for a little bit. Frost Nova is a little bit better since it prevents the entire board from attacking you, and Blizzard not only does that, but deals 2 damage to every single minion on board. You compare that to Deep Freeze, and you're just kind of like freezing one target. But hey, you get 2 3/6 elementals. That's something. Kind of iffy on this one. I'm going to give it 3 stars, but I'm just going to say swap the deck. I'm not too keen on it myself, so we'll see where that goes. Moving right along into Paladin, we have the Imprisoned Sungill, a 1 mana 2/1 Murloc, which is not a demon? That's interesting. But it does go dormant for 2 turns, and after it awakens, it summons 2 1/1 Murlocs. I guess they want to be Murloc Paladin again this year. I guess. Imprisoned Sungill isn't exactly impressive, all things considered. It could be a very powerful tempo card, though. I'm just not sure. I'm really just, I'm not feeling how this card works out, especially in terms of later on in the game. In my opinion, this one's a little bit on the lower end, and I'm not too keen on this. It's great in the early game, and I want to rate it highly for that, but at the same time, I have to consider the rest of the game state, and in my opinion, that makes this a 2-star card. I would Keelhaul it, all things considered. Next, we got the Hand of Adal, a 2 mana spell that gives a minion +2/+2 and draws a card. That's pretty nifty, honestly. That's a pretty strong card in and of itself. You put this on the right minion and you could get a lot of good stat boost out of it, and you could potentially get some great value. I'm not entirely sure where this card fits in, but I do think it'll find its way into some Paladin decks. I'm giving it 4 stars and saying this is a good plunder for the haul. Speaking of pretty good cards for Murloc Paladin, how about Murder Girl? He's a 2-mana 2/1 Murloc with the Divine Shield, and he actually has a Prime form. Once he dies, he shuffles in Murdurga Prime. Murdurga Prime? Murdurga Prime. That guy. And of course, that is an 8-mana 6/3 with Divine Shield with the battle cry to summon 4 random Murlocs, and they get Divine Shield as well. Given that there's a lot of Murloc support in recent sets and the like, including this set, I'm starting to think that Murloc Paladin is actually going to be an identity for Paladin to have. Properly. So, and Prime is going to get out of 5 stars for me. Sorry, 4 stars. Plundering. Moving right along into the Murloc Paladin build, we also have the Underlight Angling Rod, a 3-mana 3/2 weapon, which, after your hero attacks, adds a random Murloc to your hand. Yeah, no, I think that's just fairly solid. I don't know about how strong Murloc Paladin is going to be in the upcoming format, but I would say that this is a 4-star card because it just gives you the right amount of Murlocs to work with. I'd say plunder this one and definitely be able to build that Murloc Paladin that you actually should be able to build with decent theming and not some nonsense. Before we move forward, I do want to cover the entirety of the Libram package that is essentially the majority of the cards for Paladin this set. This includes the Aldor Attendant, a 2-mana 2/3 with the battle cry to reduce the cost of your Librams by 1 for the rest of the game, and Aldor Truthseeker, a 5-mana 4/6 with taunt, and the battle cry to reduce the cost by 2 for the rest of the game. These are very, very strong cards that work together with the Libram cards that were introduced in this set, and those cards are also very strong. The Libram of Wisdom is a 2-mana Libram that basically gives +1/+1 to one of your minions and gives them the Death Rattle to add a copy of Libram of Wisdom to your hand. This is potentially really powerful since you can cycle back the Libram of Wisdom constantly, and if you reduce the cost of it to nothing by Aldor Attendant and Aldor Truthseeker, you're basically getting a free +1/+1 every single turn, and that can be pretty powerful. The Libram of Justice is a 6-mana spell that it gives you a 1/4 weapon, but also reduces the health of all enemy minions to 1, which is pretty powerful in and of itself. This combos very well, especially with things like Consecration, or heck, you could just attack with a bunch of your smaller minions. And finally, we have the Libram of Hope, a 9-mana spell that not only restores 8 health to whatever you want, but summons out a Guardian with Divine Shield and Taunt, which can be very useful, especially against very aggressive decks, and is even better when you can reduce the cost by, 6? So overall, the Libram package is looking to be a very strong part of Paladin's identity. I think we'll see play in every sort of Paladin build, and I think it's going to be very, very strong. I'm giving the whole package, all of these cards get 4 stars, and I'm saying plunder it all. Plunder it for sure. And last but certainly not least, we have Lady Liadrin, a 7-mana 4/6 minion, legendary, with the battle cry to return all spells that you've cast on friendly characters back to your hand. You combine this with different things like Libram of Hope, Libram of Wisdom, Libram of Justice, and you're going to be in a very, very strong position. At first, when she was revealed, it wasn't certain whether or not she was going to be really good, but now at this point, I can safely say 4 stars. She is definitely a plunderable legendary. Very good. Absolutely great. Next, we get into the Priest class, where we come across the Imprisoned Homunculus, a 1-mana 2/5 demon, which has Dormant for 2 turns and then comes out with just Taunt. It's simple, it's effective, and more importantly, it's a 2/5 Taunt. I can't argue with that. That's actually pretty solid. I'm going to give it 4 stars and say that this is a plunder for sure. And if you think this is the most interesting minion to come out of Priest in this set, take a look at Reliquary of Souls, a 1-mana 1/3 with Lifesteal and the Prime effect that shuffles back Reliquary Prime, a 7-mana 6/8 with Taunt, with Lifesteal, and it prevents your opponent from targeting it with spells or hero powers. Well, Reliquary Prime looks pretty good to me, so I'm willing to bet that this is going to be a 4-star card. I would say this is a very powerful minion in this set. Heck, you know what? Why even stop at 4 stars? Let's just give it 5 stars. I think this is definitely a plunder for Priest. I mean, 1-mana 1/3 is already really strong, but 7-mana 6/8, and it's got Taunt, and it's got Lifesteal, and it can't be hurt by spells. That's going to be pretty hard to get past, for sure. Next, we come across the Renew spell, a 1-mana spell that not only restores 3 health, but discovers a spell. I think that's actually pretty good. I mean, you could potentially get something really big like Mass Resurrection or Plague of Death off of this, But I guess there's also some other pre-spells that are a little bit more on the low end, but they did just buff a bunch of spells. I don't know, I'm gonna kind of give this one 3 stars just because I'm not entirely sure if it'll be amazing, but I'm leaning more towards plundering it, more so than keelhauling it. But for now, swap the deck with it. Let's see how this one pans out, but I'm pretty optimistic about it. Next we come across Sapphic Veilweaver, a 2-mana 2/3 that lets you, after you cast a spell on one of your minions, add a random pre-spell to your hand. I mean, it could work, because there are plenty of pre-spells that can target your minions, but I'm not really sure that it's, like, absolutely a must-have. So I'm kind of rating it 3 stars, because I'm thinking this is more of a swap the deck kind of thing. You may see some play, but I'm not sure if it's going to stick. Next we come to the Dragon Maw Sentinel, a 2-mana 1/4 with the battle cry that if you're holding onto a dragon, it gets +1 attack and lifesteal. What can I say? I guess that's pretty good. Not really sure how strong the dragon-centric priest is, though. I'm a little iffy on it, but let me give it 3 stars and just say swap the deck with this. Next we come across the Dragon Maw Overseer, a 3-mana 2/2 that at the end of your turn gives a friendly minion +2/+2. Obviously this is a little bit of a shout out to, I think it's the Shadow Priestess? Something very similar, but, you know, that's kind of a little bit trickier to say on 3 mana that this is good. I'm not really certain about it, so I'm going to give it 3 stars and say swap the deck with it. Next we come to Apotheosis, a 3-mana spell that gives a minion +2/+3 and lifesteal. I'd say this is a pretty solid buff, 4 stars, and I'd say plunder it for sure. Next we get Psych Split, which is a 5-mana spell that gives +1/+2 to a minion, but then also summons a copy of it, and that can be potentially very strong. I'm especially thinking about copying Reliquary of Souls, or heck, Reliquary Prime even. I'm not entirely sure at 5 mana if it's going to see all the play it wants to, but summoning copies of minions is never really terrible, so I guess I'm gonna give it 3 stars, just because I'm not entirely sure if it'll pan out in the long run, but I do think it'll be worth swapping the deck on this one. Next we come to Soul Mirror, a 7-mana legendary spell that summons copies of all of your opponent's minions to your side of the field, and then they attack their copies. This is a card that I find just a little bit difficult to evaluate, not because I don't think it's good, but I don't want to say it's good, because there's a particular situation where you play Soul Mirror and it completely wipes the board, which is basically when your opponent has a bunch of minions with high attack, or equal attack to their health, or their health is just low, you copy their board and then you just wreck it. It's basically a more complicated Twisting Nether, but both players get the death rattle effects of all the minions that work out, they both get lifesteal effects, they both get all these different sort of things going on, and it can be potentially very, very powerful. On the other hand, there's a scenario where you just kind of play it on a board where the attack is a little lower than health, and then you just kind of end up with some oddball minions. I mean, if you copy the right minions, maybe this is a good effect, so you know what the heck, who's gonna play it on that kind of scenario? 4 stars, and you know what? Plunder it. Why not? Because you're gonna make me cry, that's why not. And last but certainly not least, the Skeletal Dragon enters the ring with the 7-mana 4/9 stat line, has Taunt, and at the end of your turn, adds a dragon to your hand. I guess that works well with the Dragon Priest thing they want to try and push forward, and geez, just having any kind of dragon go to your hand is probably pretty solid, so I would say this is a 4-star card. Absolutely plunder this guy. Now, Rogue got a couple of interesting packages in this set. It actually got the return of Secrets as one package, and the introduction of a pretty solid stealth setup. So, with the return of Secrets into the Rogue class, we get Blackjack Stunner, a 1-mana 1/2 with the battle cry that, while you control a secret, it bounces a minion back to the hand, and that minion will cost 2 more. Basically, you don't want to use this on your own minions. That's the long and short of this. So, I'd say that's a pretty solid reason to play this. But on top of that, we also get another card that helps out with secrets. Shadow Jeweler Hanar is a 2-mana 1/5 that, after you play a secret, you get to discover a secret from a completely different class. You could play a Rogue secret and then get a Hunter secret, or you can play a Hunter secret and get a Mage secret. Shadow Jeweler Hanar makes this kind of work. But of course we can't talk about all these different secret synergies without talking about the new secrets that have come to Rogue, like Ambush, which after your opponent plays a minion, summons you a 2/3 Ambusher with Poisonous. Not too shabby. But what if your opponent doesn't play a minion? What if they cast a spell? Well, for that we've got the Dirty Tricks secret, which after your opponent casts a spell, draws you 2 cards. And finally, what if your opponent has a really strong minion that they're attacking your little tiny guy with? Well, Bamboozle will take care of that problem by, once they attack that minion, bumping your minion up by a 3 cost, and summoning a new minion in its place. Needless to say, if I get some of this stuff, I'll definitely be playing some Secrets Rogue, because man, that's exciting right there. And Shadow Jeweler Hanar has enough health that he'll probably survive for a while, and even if you don't get that, well, Blackjack Stunner is gonna beat people back to the hand, so for me at least, I'm gonna say that this entire package deal is gonna be 4 stars, definitely worth plundering the lot. As for the stealth package, we get stuff like Spy Mistress, a 1 mana 3/1 with stealth, which is very simple and very powerful, can't argue with that. And since it has stealth, it's gonna be a little bit more difficult to get rid of than your typical minion, so I'd say that's pretty solid. 3 stars for sure, at the very least, because I think it's worth swapping the deck on this one. Perhaps the biggest reason to play the stealth package is the Ash Tongue Slayer, a 2 mana 3/2 that not only gives your stealth minion +3 attack, but also makes it immune for the turn. That's actually pretty solid, and I think that's the biggest reason to play stealth in this kind of day and age. So hey, 4 stars for me. I'd say this is a good plunder. Following up on that, we have Akama, a 3 mana 3/4 with the Prime effect on top of having stealth, and then, of course, it'll shuffle Akama Prime into the deck, which is a 6 mana 6/5, which doesn't seem that strong, but then you realize it's permanently stealthed. That could be potentially powerful, but I don't think it's the strongest out of the Prime series, and it kind of falls short unless you have that stealth package going on. I'm going to give it 3 stars only because of my uncertainty, and I'm going to say swap the deck for this particular Prime. Greyheart Sage is next as a 3 mana 3/3 that if you control a stealth minion, when he comes into the field, you get to draw 2 cards. Again, just a really solid card to really work into the stealth package. I'm going to give this guy 5 stars because I think he is worth it to run that extra couple of stealth minions to get those extra couple of cards. Plunder him for sure. And finally, we have the Cursed Vagrant, a 7 mana 7/5 with the Death Rattle summon a 7/5 Shadow with stealth. So that's not too shabby. It brings out another stealth minion and the like. That's also fairly strong at 7/5 and is itself a 7/5, but it's a little slow, and I kind of feel like that's taken away from it just a smidge. I don't know if it's going to ultimately end up in the stealth package box, but maybe it's something to give a try. Let's scale it to 3 stars and say you should swap the deck with this guy. Moving right along into the Shaman class, we have Lady Bosch, not only the new hero for your pre-order bonus in the Ashes of Outland expansion, but also a legendary herself. As a 3 mana 3/4 with spell damage +1, she has the Prime effect that shuffles back Bosch Prime, a 7 mana 5/4, also with spell damage +1, but with the battle cry to draw 3 spells that'll all cost 3 less. That's pretty powerful, especially depending on the spells that you're running in your Shaman deck, and that definitely could add up to quite a bit of value. That could definitely have some impact in and of itself. So for me, I'm going to definitely give Vosh Prime and Vosh 4 stars. This is a plunder in my opinion. Next, we come across the Bogstrok Clacker, a 3 mana 3/3 with the battle cry to transform adjacent minions into minions that cost 1 more. A little bit of a miniature evolve effect, but I don't know how well that's going to really pan out. I'm going to give this guy 3 stars just because I'm not sure about the whole evolve mechanic, but, you know, swap the deck with him to see how you like him. The other card that works out in the Evolved Shaman is the Bogspine Knuckles, a 5 mana 4/2 weapon that after your hero attacks, transforms all the minions you control into minions that cost 1 more. This could potentially be very powerful, but it also could potentially backfire as with any evolution sort of thing, and I'm not sure that 5 mana is really worth it for the evolution effect. Even if you are transforming all of your minions, it's not exactly an immediate must-have kind of run. And maybe this is going to be a 3-star card. I'd say swap the deck with this one as well. Next, we come across the Marsh Spawn, a 3/3/4 elemental with the battle cry that if you casted a spell on your last turn, you get to discover a spell. This is kind of a new thing with Shaman as of late, where now they're going to have like this spell thing where it's like if you cast a spell on your previous turn, you get to have an additional effect on some of your cards. Marsh Spawn is a good example of one of those that helps kind of feed the momentum of that spell Shaman deck, and I think it's a pretty solid card in its own right. So you know what? 4 stars for this guy. I'd say plunder him for sure. Next, we have the Serpent Shrine Portal, a 3 mana spell that deals 3 damage and then summons a 3-cost minion and then overloads for 1. It's a pretty interesting mix of effects overall, and basically might as well have cost 4 mana, but I don't know about 4 mana deal 3 damage, summon a 3-cost minion per se. I do think it's a pretty solid card, all things considered, so I'm going to go ahead and give it 4 stars because I think it will show up in a lot of different Shaman decks. Definitely a plunder in my opinion. Next we have Totemic Reflection, a 3-mana spell that gives a minion +2/+2, and if that minion is a totem, it duplicates the totem, which can be pretty useful if you're copying something like Flame Tongue Totem or Mana Tide Totem, but overall is kind of iffy otherwise. I don't know if it's a great buff for the deck. I'm going to go ahead and give this one 3 stars and say you might want to swap the deck on this one. Next we got the Vivid Spore spell, a 4-mana spell that actually gives all of your minions the death rattle to re-summon this minion. I don't know if it's really going to be that good. Like, I don't know, really, like, there's not a whole lot of Shaman minions that immediately come to mind where I'm like, that's a minion you want to resummon again. You really just want to have an established board with this before you play something like Vivid Spores, which will help out, and that's really more of a win more card at that point, so I don't really know if it's going to actually see that much play. I'm iffy on it, but maybe I'll give it 3 stars anyway, just because I want to swap the deck with it. I guess. It's just such a weird thing. I don't know. Fitting right in with the spell Shaman theme is the Torrent spell, a 5-mana deal 8 damage to a minion, but it costs 3 less if you cast a spell on your last turn. Combine this with something like Lady Vosh, or better yet, Vosh Prime, and you're dealing even more damage and possibly even getting this card for much cheaper. Needless to say, Torrent is going to be a pretty solid card in my opinion, and I think dealing 8 damage to a minion for 2 mana is basically going to be very, very solid. Hard to say that this won't see 5 stars of play. I'd say plunder this for sure. Next we have the Shattered Rumbler, another spell synergy card. 5 mana 4/6 elemental with the battle cry that if you cast a spell last turn, deal 2 damage to all of the minions. You just can't argue with that, and I think that's going to make something like Quest Shaman really, really powerful over the course of the game. Certainly going to be very strong tempo-wise, especially if you can double the battle cry. Just a huge board wipe, potentially just a Flame Strike on its own, so hey, what can I say? That's a 5-star card in my opinion. I'd say plunder this guy for sure. And last but certainly not least, the Lurker Below shows up as a legendary 6-mana 6/3 with the interesting battle cry to deal 3 damage to a minion, and if it kills it, you get to deal that 3 damage again to whatever minions are adjacent to it. This has the potential to snowball into a complete board wipe depending on how your opponent's board state is, and what minion you end up picking to work along with that. I'm a little iffy about that little stat line maneuver, but if you wipe the board out, I guess there's not much you can say about it. Seems a little bit of an odd man out kind of deal, so 3 stars for me, because I just feel like it needs more swapping of the deck to get it all kind of sorted out. That's all. Moving right along, we got the Shadow Council in Warlock, a 1-mana spell that replaces your entire hand with demons, but then gives them +2/+2. Shadow Council has that kind of potential to be really, really strong, or maybe not so strong. And it really kind of depends on the hand size you have. You get better demons, you get more demons. I don't know, it's a little bit hit or miss for me, so I'm going to give it 3 stars and say swap the deck, try this out. Maybe this is actually a really powerful card in disguise as a memeier card, if you will. Next we have the Unstable Fellbolt, a 1-mana spell that deals 3 damage to an enemy minion, but also deals 3 damage to a friendly minion? I mean, I guess if you want to kill your stuff as well as your opponent's stuff, this has potential synergies, but last I checked, Warlock didn't really have that kind of synergy stuff right now. I don't know. I'm not really sold on this one, though. I'm going to give it 2 stars and say this is more of a Keelhaul option more than anything. Imprisoned Scrap Imp is next as a 2-mana 3/3 demon with the dormant effect, and of course after it awakens, it has an effect, this case giving you every minion in your hand +2/+2. I suppose there's some potential. There's discussions about combining this with Shadow Council, which then gives your demons +4/+4, and that certainly has the potential to be very swingy, especially considering that comes out as early as turn 4, all things considered, and actually makes for a very scary combination. I'm a little bit concerned now about this card. 4 stars. That's gonna see play, and that's a very concerning combination. Oh dear. Plunder it. Next we have Kenrathod Ebenlock, a 2-mana 3/2, which has the ability to reduce the cost of your minions by 1, but only if they're demons. And he's got the Prime effect. Kenrathod Prime, on the other hand, is an 8-mana 7/6 that, when he's summoned, summons out 3 friendly demons that died this game, and, well, that's kind of it. I'm not really impressed with this Prime, per se. I kind of wish he was a little better, to be honest. 3 3 stars. Swap the deck for this one. I'm not sure about him. Dark Glare comes up as a very interesting card. A 3 mana 3/4 that when your hero takes damage, you refresh 2 of your mana crystals. What is this Druid effect doing on my Warlock minion? Needless to say, this kind of effect is potentially potent. Obviously, the inherent synergy is that you get essentially a free hero power. But, you know, maybe there's some more that can be done with this. I'm going to give this guy 3 stars just because I'm not entirely sure about him. But swap the deck, needless to say. The Dark Portal is absolutely the #1 reason Mountain Giant had to go into Wild. It's a 4 mana spell that lets you draw a minion, but if you have 8 or more cards in your hand, reduces the cost of that minion by 5. Summoning really big demons, or heck, any big minion for a lot cheaper is always going to be in style, so heck, what the hey. 4 stars, and I'd say this is a good old plunder, for sure. The Nightshade Matron is an interesting demon, 4 mana 5/5, with the Rush effect and the battle cry to discard the highest cost card in your hand. Which is a little bit different from the Rastakan's Rumble, discard the lowest cost card from your hand. I guess in that regard you could be unclogging your hand from one of the more bulky cards, but I'm not really sure where this is supposed to fit in right now. I'm gonna give this 3 stars and say swap the deck for her. Now here's an interesting effect that I'm sure you've never seen before. Keelhauled the Breaker is a 6 mana 3/3 with the battle cry to destroy a minion. But if you drew him this turn, he actually destroys all the minions. Kind of like a smaller version of Twisting Nether, that if you draw him, well, that's perfect. It's gonna be a little iffy though, because I think if you draw him too early, you may end up just kind of wasting his effect. And if you draw him too late, well, I guess there's not really a too late. You just won't draw him and then you'll be dead. And for me, I think Keelhauled the Breaker is pretty decent, but I'm gonna give him 3 stars, because I think he's more of a swab the deck type. Next we have the Hand of Gul'dan, which is to go along with the Skull of Gul'dan, except this is a Warlock spell, so it's not really that good. It's a 6 mana spell that after you play or discard it, you actually get to draw 3 cards. That sounds pretty good, except I don't remember Gul'dan or Warlock right now being so big on discard synergy, and we just lost a lot of the good cards that work with discard synergy, so 2 stars for this guy. I think he's gonna be more of a Keelhaul proposition for you. And finally we have the Enhanced Dreadlord, an 8 mana 5/7 demon with Taunt and the death rattle to summon a 5/5 Dreadlord with Lifesteal in his place. It seems alright, I'm just not really sure that you really need to have this super huge, big, warlocky minion in a deck that doesn't have a whole lot of ways to reduce the cost of it outside of something like Dark Portal. I guess that kind of puts this card in a decent enough position that I could say he gets 3 stars. You might want to swap the deck, try him out. Finally, we come to the Warrior class, which has a lot of interesting tools at its disposal. Let's start with Sword and Board, a 1 mana spell that deals 2 damage to a minion and gives you 2 armor. Simple, easy to remember. Ultimately, this is kind of more of a miniature bash, so it seems like it's alright, but the minions seem a little bit smaller than they need to be for this, so 3 stars, I'd say swap the deck. Next, we have the Imprisoned Gnarg, a 1 mana 2/2 demon that goes dormant for 2 turns, and when he awakens, gives you a 3/2 weapon. I'm not really sure if it's going to be that powerful, though, and I'm not really sure if it's that impactful, but then again, getting a 3/2 weapon is very impactful, and you're not even spending mana on it at that point, so you get the ability to play more stuff. I'm gonna say this is 4 stars. I think I would definitely plunder this guy. He seems like he'd be alright. Next we have Corsair Cache, a 2 mana spell that draws you a weapon and gives it +1/+1. I don't think Warrior has a ton of weapons that they really want to give +1/+1. The only one that really comes to mind lately is Ankar, which is definitely going to be very useful, but this one seems more like a 3-star card. I want to give it more credit, but I really want to see more weapons before I can really definitively bump this guy up to more. So 3 stars for now, swap the deck, and we'll see how this works. But Captain Yugioh, I hear you say. You could be talking about the Bulwark of Azzinoth here. That's a 3 mana 1/4 weapon that basically whenever you would take damage, loses 1 durability instead of you taking that damage. That's really strong, especially if you draw it using Corsair Cache. Why would your opponent attack you with lots of big damage? That's the thing. Also, if you're not attacking with the Bulwark of Azzinoth, I feel like you're not doing enough with it. So I'm not really sure about this card, honestly. I'm going to give it 3 stars and say swap the deck, because I want to give it more credit. I want to say it's a really strong weapon, but it seems like it's not that strong a weapon. Next we got the Warmaul Challenger, a 3-mana 1/10. 110? 110. With the battle cry to attack a minion and keep on attacking it until the death of one of those minions. It's pretty flavorful, honestly. And having a one-on-one fight is just really, really powerful. Certainly some potential here and there. I'm gonna give this guy 3 stars. Let's just swap the deck on him. I'm not really sure about him, really. Although, it could combo well with the Bone Chewer Raider, a 3-mana 3/3 with the battle cry that if you have a damaged minion, like say a Warmaul Challenger that didn't die, this guy, gal, what are you? I think that's a girl. I can't tell with orcs most of the time. In any case, it's a 3-mana 3/3 that if you have a damaged minion, gets +1/+1 and rush. Kind of like the Furious Fellwing from Demon Hunter, but instead of being a 4/2 for 2, it's a 4/4 for 3. I think the reliance on having a damaged minion on your field is really the killer for this card. But I'm gonna be generous. Let's say it's a 3-star card and that you would rather swap the deck and try it out. Now here's an interesting callback to an earlier card in Hearthstone history, Blade Storm, a 3-mana spell that deals 1 damage to every single minion and then repeats until 1 minion dies. And that has the potential to be a board wipe or just a really strong, massive, well, hit. On top of that, you can combine it with the Plague of Wrath, which will basically then deal damage to all minions until they die, and then you Plague of Wrath to just completely wipe it out. Granted, Whirlwind is probably a better combination piece at that point, but who wants to play Whirlwind when you've got Blade Storm? I'm gonna give it 4 stars, definitely a plunder on this one. And now we come to Kargath Blade Fist, a 4-mana 4/4 with Rush and the Death Rattle effect to shuffle Kargath Prime, who is an 8-mana 10/10 with Rush that after it attacks and kills a minion, gives you 10 armor. That is a prime effect if I ever saw one, and that, believe me, if you're like me, you've seen a few of them now. So definitely, in my opinion, Kargath Bloodfist gets the 4-star rating. I think he's a very strong minion, running into things, he's active, and then he can give you a lot of armor when he goes into his prime form, which is already pretty strong. I think it's going to be playing out in a very powerful Control Warrior build, potentially, so needless to say, I'd plunder that guy. Next we have Scrap Golem, a 5-mana 4/5 mech with Taunt and Death Rattle to gain armor equal to its attack. Definitely seems like something that could fit into some sort of wall warrior, control warrior type of thing. Mainly a taunt warrior, because there's a lot of taunt cards that just buff taunt mains and the like. But I'm not really sure how that really fits into any particular deck right now. There's not really a dedicated taunt warrior deck that exists per se that is like high level. So in any case, I think I'm just going to rate this one 3 stars because I'm just not sure quite where it fits in. And just swap the deck with this one. Let's see how this one plays out. And last but not least, the Blood Boil Brute comes in as a 7-mana 6/8 with Rush that costs 1 less for each damaged minion in play. That's got the potential to be Mogu Flesh Shaper levels of powerful, certainly, but, you know, you have to combine it with something like Whirlwind or Blade Storm in order to really maximize the value out of this card. Still has a lot of powerhouse effect to it, and I think that's a good enough reason to give it 4 stars, in my opinion. Definitely a plunder on this guy. And now we come to the last part, and yet maybe perhaps one of the most important parts of the set. The neutral minions. Because sometimes that's where the most powerful cards really are at. Let's start with the Og Merchants. We've got the Guardian Og Merchant, the Rocket Og Merchant, and the Ethereal Og Merchant. All of them are 1-mana 2/1s that the battle cry to deal 1 damage and then give the minion that you damage a certain effect. Ethereal Og Merchant only gives spell damage +1, which isn't really that useful, so I'm going to give him 1 star and say you Keelhaul that guy. Rocket Og Merchant, I'd argue, is a little bit better, which it gives Rush, but I don't know if that's going to be super awesome to give a minion Rush after you've already damaged it. So in my opinion, that's going to put it at 3 stars and say swap the deck with that. And finally, we have Guardian Og Merchant, which gives a minion Divine Shield, which I think is the best out of the 3. So I'd say this is a 4-star card, and definitely we'll see play in a lot of different decks. Definitely a plunder in that case. Infectious Sporling is a 1-mana 1/2 that whenever it damages a minion, transforms that minion to another Infectious Sporling. I'd say that it has a lot of utility, but it isn't a very fast effect, and it isn't really that great, especially when it's cyclical, and eventually it'll die to removal. So in my opinion, that makes it a 1-star card. I'd say Keelhaul that. Soulbound Ash Tongue is a 1 mana 1/4 that whenever it takes damage, deals that same amount of damage to your hero. I don't think anybody wants that, so that's a 1-star card, and I'd say Keelhaul that. Moarg Artificer is a 2 mana 2/4 demon that doubles the damage that all minions take from spells, which seems like it's pretty good on paper, but I don't think it's going to actually work out in practice. This makes it kind of a little bit niche, so I'm going to give it 2 stars and say Keelhaul it anyway. Imprisoned Vilefiend is a 2 mana 3/5 demon with rush effect, but is also dormant for a couple of turns, which means it's not exactly going to be that great, especially when it comes out as a 2 mana 3/5 battle cry, deal 3 damage. I'm going to say 2 stars and definitely Keelhaul it. Bone Chewer Brawler is an interesting card, 2 mana 2/3 with taunt, and whenever it takes damage, gains +2 attack. Sounds like it could be potentially powerful, but I don't think it's actually going to be that great given that it has such a low amount of health for a taunt minion, so 1 star for me, and I'd say you Keelhaul that. Rustworn Initiate is a 2 mana 2/2 with a death rattle to summon a 1/1 imp with spell damage +1 when it dies. Seems like it'd be useful, but I don't think tying it to the laster part of it that it's a little bit weaker is going to be that great, so 1 star for me, I'd say Keelhaul that. Terran Gorefiend introduces an interesting effect. At 3 mana 3/4, he has the battle cry to destroy all other minions, and on his death rattle, resummons them with +1/+1. It has the potential to be a very interesting effect, but I don't know if that's really going to be something that's worthwhile. It may be a little too slow, it may not be that great, you might get silenced and just wiped out your board for no reason. So, 3 stars, it'll be interesting to see if that works out, and I'd say swap the deck with him. Overconfident Orc is a 3 mana 1/6 with taunt, and that while he has full health, has an extra +2 attack. Kind of reminds you a little bit of Tar Creeper, but it's a little bit temporary, so I'm going to say he's more of a 3-star card. Maybe swap the deck, I'm not entirely sold on this guy. Blistering Rot is a 3 mana 1/2 that at the end of your turn summons another Rot that has the same stats as it. It doesn't copy any extra effects, so I feel like that's inherently worse. Definitely more of a 1-star card in my opinion, I'd say Keelhaul that. Frozen Shadow Weaver is a 3 mana 4/3 with the battle cry to freeze a minion. Seems pretty powerful, especially on the neutral side of things, so I'd say this is a 4-star card. Certainly something worth plundering for any class that wants a little bit of freeze action. Terrorguard Escapee. Terrorguard Escapee is a 3 mana 3/7 demon that summons 3 1/100s for your opponent. Doesn't seem like that great of a trade-off, but 3 mana 3/4, is that pretty good? Maybe. I'm a little bit debatable on that, but I'm going to say this is a 2-star card, and I feel like you ought to plunder in the long haul. Maiev Shadow Song is a 4 mana 4/3 legendary that has the battle cry to make a minion go dormant for 2 turns. That's forced removal, and it certainly keeps the minion out of play for a while. That means it's uninteractable, it doesn't get revived or anything, so seems like it's a pretty solid option. I would say Maiev Shadow Song is going to be 5 stars, definitely a plunder. Magtheridon is a very interesting card, a 4 mana 12/12 demon, but he comes into play dormant and he summons out 3 1/3 wardens for your opponent. But when they die, Magtheridon awakens, and then he destroys all other minions. There's a little bit of potential for Magtheridon, but I'm not really certain about a 4/12/12 necessarily, especially with such a huge drawback. If you cheat on Magtheridon, he's just dormant, and I don't think there's a way you can actually bring him out at that point, in which case he's a dead card. So in that case, I'm kind of thinking he's more of a 3-star, swap the deck kind of card, see what you can do with him, but I don't think I'm going to be sold on him being that great. Replicatotron is a 4 mana 3/3 mech that has the interesting effect that when at the end of your turn will transform a neighbor to a copy of itself. Doesn't really seem like it's really that worth it unless you could buff it up, but since all the magnetic stuff is leaving, that leaves him more as a 1-star card. I'm going to say pass. Keelhaul. Out of here. Rustworn Cultist is interesting. As a 4 mana 3/3, he has the battle cry to give all of your other minions the death rattle to summon a 1/1 demon. I feel like that's okay, but it's not really something that's going to be super worthwhile, so maybe just give him 2 stars and say Keelhaul that guy. Disguised Wanderer is a 4 mana 3/3 with the death rattle to summon a 9/1 Inquisitor, but I don't think that's really worth it. Even if it is a 9 mana attacking minion, the 1 health is a real turnoff, so I'd say 1 star, take him out, Keelhaul. Burrowing Scorpion is a 4 mana 5/3 beast that deals 2 damage to a minion when he comes in, and if he kills it, he gains stealth. So I'd say that's pretty worthwhile, especially considering you can run him in Beast Hunter. So definitely expect to see this guy out and about in the sands. Definitely a 4-star card. I'd say that's a good old plunder. Belfin Navigator is a 4 mana 4/4 Murloc with the battle cry to give all of your other Murlocs +1/+1. Makes some very strong boards even stronger and has the potential to be very powerful. So, needless to say, I think I'm okay with that. I'd say he's a 4-star card for your Murloc-based deck. Plunder him if you can. Alar is an elemental, 5 mana 7/3, and has the interesting death rattle that'll summon out the Ashes of Alar, which has the effect, of course, of summoning Alar at the start of your turn, but is itself a 0/3. Doesn't seem like that's going to be kind of worth it, even though 5 mana 7/3 is very powerful. 3 health is not that much for 5 mana, so it seems like it's not going to be worth it, and especially considering the egg is a little bit easy to get rid of. 2 stars, I'm going to say Keelhaul on this one. The Rusted Raider is a 5-mana 1/8 with Taunt and Rush, and the battle cry to get +4 attack on the turn you play it. Kinda reminds you of Militia Commander and is a little bit more expanded and has that big old taunt fist, but I'm kind of iffy on it. I'd say 3 stars and swap the deck. Could be useful, could be powerful, could be meh. Waste Warden is a 5-mana 3/3 with the battle cry to deal 3 damage to a minion, as well as all other minions of the same minion type as that minion. So this kind of makes it a bit of an interesting card. Could be powerful against specific decks, especially if specific tribal decks become certainly powerful, Murloc for instance. So definitely worthwhile looking into. I'd say 3 stars and swap the deck. He may be useful, he may be techy, but we'll see where that pans out. Keelhauled Sunstrider is a legendary minion, 6 mana 4/7 that each turn, every third spell you cast, costs 0. Has a lot of potential, certainly has seen a lot of experimentation, but I think he's going to be more specific to certain decks and not necessarily a widespread format. I'm going to give him 3 stars for that, so he can just swap the deck with that. Dragon Maw Skystalker is a 6 mana 5/6 dragon with the Death Rattle that is summon a 3/4 Dragon Rider in his place. Seems like it's pretty okay. I'm not really sold on the stat line necessarily, but I'm not going to knock it till I try it. And besides, we've seen Death Rattle effects like this be dismissed and passed over in favor of other things. So hey, you know what? 3 stars and I'd say swap the deck for him. Scavenging Savara is a 6 mana 6/3 demon with the battle cry to deal 6 damage split up among all other minions. Kinda has a little bit of that dynamic feel, but more in a neutral class and more expanded to all other minions, so it's a little debatable on how good this can be. Certainly has the potential to be very powerful, but it also has the potential to backfire on your own. I'm going to give it 3 stars and say swap the deck with it, but definitely has the potential to be very powerful in specific control decks. Bone Chewer Vanguard is a 7 mana 4/10 with Taunt that whenever it takes damage gets +2 attack. Certainly has the potential to be very powerful, but at 7 mana it's a little bit expensive, and even with 10 health, I don't think at that point in the game it's going to be that powerful. Certainly could have some potential to it, so I'm going to give it 3 stars and say swap the deck. I expect Wall Priest decks to kind of run that. Be wary of that. Supreme Abyssal is an 8 mana 12/12. Hey, I referenced this guy earlier in the video. He's also a demon, but he can't attack heroes, so he kind of sucks. 1 star Keelhaul. And last but not least, Scrapyard Colossus is a 10 mana 7/7 elemental with Taunt and the Death Rattle to summon a 7/7 Felcrat Colossus with Taunt in its place when it dies. Sounds pretty good, but 10 mana is a little bit late for that. I'm gonna give it 2 stars Keelhaul. Woo! Wow, that was a lot of cards to go through. Certainly a lot of cool options to look forward to, and some other cards that have potential, might not work out, but they may work out, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this review. I know it's a bit long, and I know it's the whole set, but hopefully you like the format. Let me know about it in the comments down below, and hopefully I will see you in the next expansion. Heck, let's just see what the next video is like. I'll see you guys next week. Good night!
More pizza, Brian! With onions and ham too. Now coat me in pizza and throw me, goddamn you!
And even if you don't go for the face because you just summoned a rush minion, you can still attack whatever minion you want. You don't have to attack the taunt, take the tack, a tip the tap, a tip the tap, tap.